Melissa Ruba was in bed in Simpson, Pennsylvania in August 2013 when a gunshot tore through the house and changed everything. The bullet hit Melissa while she was lying in her bed. The shot came from her husband, Bruno Ruba. Melissa was rushed to the hospital, but she later died there. From the beginning, Bruno's story was that it was an accident. He said he had been checking the chamber of his gun when it accidentally discharged. He said he shot his own hand in the process. The explanation was presented as a terrible mistake, the kind of moment that could ruin a family without any intention behind it. No charges were filed in 2013. Time moved forward, but the case did not truly close. 8 years later, the shooting was pulled back into the light. The same evidence existed, but the way it was viewed changed completely. The file was opened again, and the first thing that stood out was not one detail, but the pattern. The 911 call. In that call, Bruno shifted his account almost immediately. Within seconds of speaking, he began changing what he claimed had happened. One moment, it sounded like there had been fighting. Then he backed away from that. Then the story shifted again into handling the gun, then into playing with it, then into a version meant to sound careless instead of violent, terrorist instead of violent. Those changes mattered because they happened in real time before anyone had coached him, before anyone could shape the story for him. They revealed instability and they revealed panic. When the case was re-examined, the physical scene also started telling a clearer story. There was blood spatter behind the headboard. Bruno had a version of events that described one direction, one position, one type of motion. But the blood pattern sat in a different direction, in a different relationship to the bed, like the violence had unfolded from a different angle than he claimed. A forensic reconstruction formed a coherent picture. Melissa was most likely on the bed. Bruno was most likely above her when the gun went off. That position explained two things at once. It explained how Melissa was shot where she lay. And it explained how Bruno's hand was injured at the same time, consistent with being close to the weapon at the moment of discharge. As the second look deepened, one piece of evidence became the hinge the entire case would swing on. Home security footage. Bruno was heavily focused on security. Cameras were set up around the property, though many were not working. But one camera was working, and it happened to be in the one location that mattered, not for video, but for audio. In 2013, the audio could not be reviewed properly. The technology was obsolete. The software needed to open and interpret the file was no longer available in a usable way. Whoa. The footage was sealed away, left as a dead end. Years later, that dead end opened. With newer tools, the audio could be enhanced. It could be cleaned up, amplified, and separated from the muddy noise that had made it almost impossible to understand. When the enhanced audio was finally heard clearly, it revealed what Bruno had insisted never happened. A fight. The argument was there, captured in the background, close enough to the camera that the sound was picked up. The night was no longer a quiet accident. It was a conflict unfolding in real time, leading straight into the gunshot that ended Melissa's life. In that recording, the moments leading up to the shooting were no longer guesswork. The sound carried the truth without needing interpretation. It placed emotion, tension, and escalation into the timeline where Bruno had tried to erase them. Melissa's family had long sensed something was wrong. One, they remembered warning signs. They remembered Bruno's controlling behavior. Melissa could not go anywhere without him tracking her movement. He called repeatedly. If she did not answer, he called other phones, pushing through to find her. What looked like devotion from a distance was control up close. Melissa's own daughters carried memories that did not fit the image of a safe home. They remembered moments that left them uneasy instead of them uneasy. They remembered things they saw and heard that they did not fully understand at the time. Sabrina remembered seeing Bruno grab Melissa by the hair and whip her around. Chelsea remembered Melissa telling her, only weeks before the shooting, that Bruno had pulled a gun on her during an argument. Those details did not describe an accident waiting to happen. They described a household where fear had already entered. Yet even after Melissa died, Bruno remained in his daughters' lives. That was the second tragedy inside the first. The daughters loved their father. The father they knew could be a great dad. Their minds struggled to hold two realities at once, the father they loved and the man who shot their mother in bed. Their relationships with Bruno were not identical. Sabrina lived out of state, distance softened what she saw day to day, but it also left her vulnerable to another kind of pressure. She feared Bruno would harm himself. He suggested it repeatedly. The idea that he might kill himself became a lever that kept her emotionally tied to him. Chelsea lived right next door. She had a son, Greg, and her son adored his grandfather. That bond shaped everything. Chelsea did not want to destroy her child's world. She kept returning because her son's love for Bruno kept pulling her back. After the shooting, more details surfaced that revealed how Bruno operated in the aftermath. He asked her daughters to sign over their inheritance after Melissa's death. The money traced back to Melissa's mother, who had won about $1 million at a casino, paid out in installments. After her death, the installments went to Melissa and her sister Joanne. After Melissa died, Melissa's portion was supposed to be divided between Bruno and the daughters. Bruno persuaded both daughters to sign it over to him, about $300,000. Sabrina signed because she felt guilt and pity. She felt bad for him. In that moment, she was still locked inside the emotional confusion that often follows sudden trauma. After Bruno was convicted, the accounts were frozen. There were also fractures in the marriage that came into focus later, including Bruno's alleged affair with a woman named Tanya Wesky. Tanya denied any affair, but the night of the shooting, Tanya and her husband Jack had dinner with Bruno and Melissa. The couples were close enough that they were planning a vacation together to the Dominican Republic to celebrate the Ruba's anniversary. Melissa never made it to that trip. The Weskys went without them. And afterward, messages and attention stayed fixed on Bruno in a way that suggested something deeper than friendship. Chelsea also described another disturbing act. After Melissa died, Bruno asked Chelsea to clean up the scene. He wanted her to remove and destroy the mattress where Melissa had been killed. It was a request that pushed beyond grief and into erasure, an attempt to scrub the home of what had happened. At the same time, there was body camera footage showing Bruno sitting casually on the edge of the bed in the space where Melissa's blood had been. He did not appear shattered. He did not appear repulsed. He looked comfortable in a place that should have been unbearable. Nearly 9 years after Melissa's death, the case finally shifted. On June 3, 2022, Bruno was charged with Melissa's murder. There was also a theft charge tied to the inheritance money he had taken from his daughters, but that charge was later dropped. Bruno hired defense attorney Joe DeAndrea Gandia. The same lawyer who had helped him avoid charges in 2013 now faced a very different case. The evidence was no longer frozen in mystery. It had a voice. The enhanced security camera audio, the forensic reconstruction, the contradictions on the 911 call, and in later explanations. The case did not depend on fading memories. Much of it was preserved on tape, preserved in patterns, preserved in details that could be replayed again and again. Bruno took a plea deal to third-degree murder. He was sentenced to 12 to 40 years in prison. He could be eligible for parole as early as 2035. Even after the plea, the daughters remained conflicted, the sense that he had no one else pulled at them. The desire to cut him off clashed with the reality that he was still their father, and the father they knew had once been the center of their lives. Then another tragedy struck the family. Chelsea's son, Greg, died in an ATV accident just weeks after her interview. Greg was 13 years old. He loved off-roading. He loved his four-wheeler. It was part of his daily life chores and homework first, then riding until the sun went down, disappearing into the long stretch of land behind the house. Chelsea had built much of her relationship with Bruno around Greg. She did not want to break her son's heart. She did not want to take his grandfather away from him. Then Greg was taken anyway. Melissa was gone, and now Greg was gone. The case of Melissa Ruba ended with a conviction, but the family's pain did not end with the sentence. The truth came late, after years of silence and denial, after evidence sat waiting for the world to catch up to it. Melissa was shot in her bed by Bruno Ruba. He claimed it was an accident. But the sound captured inside that house, and the scene left behind in blood and pattern, told the story he tried to bury.